In the dusty plains of Texas, in the year 1836, a small mission became the stage of one of the most legendary last stands in the history of mankind. The Battle of the Alamo, fought between February 23rd and March 6th, is not just a clash of arms, but a story that defines the spirit of resistance, sacrifice, and the undying pursuit of liberty. Imagine it: 200 men, ordinary settlers, frontiersmen, and adventurers, surrounded by thousands of Mexican troops under the command of General Antonio L. Pez de Santa Anna. They knew the odds. They knew survival was nearly impossible. And yet, instead of retreating, they chose to make a stand that would echo across generations. Historian Stephen L. Hardin writes in Texian Iliad, a military history of the Texas Revolution, the Alamo defenders understood they were sacrificing themselves not for victory, but for the idea that freedom was worth any price. This video will bring to life the courage of men like Davy Crockett, William B. Travis, and James Bowie, and explain why their sacrifice has become one of the foundational legends of the United States. The road to the Alamo. The Alamo did not emerge as a symbol out of thin air. It was the culmination of decades of tension between cultural identities, political experiments, and clashing notions of power. To understand why men like Travis, Bowie, and Crockett chose to make their stand in that crumbling mission, we must look deeper into the roots of the conflict. In the early 1820s, Mexico, fresh from its independence from Spain, invited American settlers into Texas under the impresario system, offering vast tracts of land in exchange for loyalty to the Mexican state. Families poured in from the United States, bringing with them their customs, their Protestant faith, their language, and their vision of self-governance. But as their numbers swelled, so did their resistance to Mexican authority, particularly as Mexico struggled to balance its fragile federal system. By 1835, Santa Anna had dismantled the Federalist Constitution and established himself as a centralist dictator, nullifying local autonomy. The Texians, who had already tasted independence and spirit, saw this not just as political tyranny, but as an assault on their way of life. Historian Timothy Madovina in the Alamo remembered, Tejano accounts and perspectives reminds us that this struggle was not only Anglo settlers against Mexico, but also involved Tejano families who sided with the Texians, sharing the same hunger for liberty and local control. Thus, the Alamo was not merely a foreign intrusion against Mexico, it was a collision of ideals within the very soil of Texas. The small mission of San Antonio de Valero, known as the Alamo, was not originally built for war. Founded in the early 18th century by Franciscan missionaries, it stood as a spiritual outpost long before it became a fortress. Its stone walls, weathered by time, were never designed to repel a modern army, and yet in 1836 they would serve as the last bastion of freedom for fewer than 200 souls. When Texian forces seized San Antonio in late 1835, after the Battle of Bexar, the Alamo became their stronghold. But even then, many questioned whether the mission could withstand a siege. Sam Houston, commander of Texian forces, urged the defenders to abandon the position, warning that it was indefensible. Yet men like Travis and Bowie insisted on holding their ground. Historian James Donovan, in The Blood of Heroes, the 13-day struggle for the Alamo and the sacrifice that forged a nation, captures this determination. The Alamo was both a fortress and a crucible. Its defenders understood that its walls would not protect them. Instead, they chose to sanctify those walls with their blood. This decision transformed the mission from a military liability into a shrine of defiance. For 13 days, the Alamo would stand not as stone and mortar, but as the beating heart of a revolution. Context: the road to the Alamo, Mexico, newly independent from Spain, controlled vast regions, including Texas. But the Mexican government was fragile, and settlers from the United States poured in. By the 1830s, tensions grew. Santa Anna, who had risen to power as a dictator, imposed centralization and absolute authority. The Texians, influenced by American Republican ideals, valued self-rule and liberty. This clash of visions culminated in rebellion. Historian T. R. Fehrenbach notes in Lone Star, A History of Texas and the Texans, the Alamo was not merely a battle of numbers. It was a struggle of systems, dictatorship against liberty, centralism against self-government. Heroes of the Alamo at the heart of the stand were men who would become legends. Davy Crockett, frontiersman, U.S. Congressman, already a folk hero, whose presence elevated the battle to national significance. Historian William C. Davis states, Crockett's presence at the Alamo elevated the struggle from a provincial skirmish to a national epic. William B. Travis, the young commander who wrote the immortal letter, I shall never surrender or retreat. Then I call on you in the name of liberty, of patriotism, and everything dear to the American character, to come to our aid with all dispatch. James Bowie, legendary fighter, gravely ill during the siege, but still a symbol of toughness and grit. The siege and the stand Santa Anna brought 1,800 troops against less than 200 defenders. For 13 days, cannon fire battered the mission. Inside, the Texians prepared for certain death. Historian Randy Roberts, in A Line in the Sand, The Alamo in Blood. And Memory wrote, The Alamo was never about tactical victory. It was about defiance. Each night, the defenders sang, prayed, and readied themselves. At dawn, Mexican drums reminded them that death was near. Now, before we dive into the climax of this legendary siege, let me ask you, if you believe stories of sacrifice, courage, and liberty must continue to be told, then hit that subscribe button and join us here at Vertex of Time. Your support helps us keep history alive and deliver powerful stories of the past directly to you. The final assault, March 6, 1836. Before dawn, Santa Anna ordered the attack. Mexican troops surged forward. The defenders cut them down with rifles and cannons, but waves kept coming. They climbed the walls. Fighting turned brutal and hand to hand. Travis was shot early, dying by his cannon. Crockett fought ferociously, swinging his rifle as a club. Accounts differ on his death, but all remember his courage. Bowie, too ill to rise, fought from his sickbed until the end. When the sun rose, all defenders were dead. Historian Walter Lord, in A Time to Stand, wrote, If the Alamo had been a defeat, it was the most glorious defeat in history. The legacy, remember the Alamo, the slaughter enraged the Texians. Their sacrifice became a rallying cry. At San Jacinto, Sam Houston's forces crushed Santa Anna, shouting, Remember the Alamo. Texas won its independence. The Alamo became a legend, not just a battle. Historian Richard Flores, in Remembering the Alamo, explains, The Alamo is less about what happened and more about what it came to mean, the embodiment of resistance, the cost of liberty, and the power of collective memory. Conclusion. The Alamo is not only about 1836. It is about the timeless struggle between tyranny and liberty. It is about the courage to stand when hope is gone. In Travis's own words, victory or death, they chose death and gave victory to a cause greater than themselves. So, when you hear Remember the Alamo, understand that it is not just a relic of history. It is a living reminder that freedom has a price, and that those who stood in that mission in 1836 still inspire us today.